Woman was given away as infertile. But what the farmer saw made his heart crumble. Emily Wilson felt the weight of the maroon dress tighten around her waist as the horse pulled the wagon along the dirt roads. Beside her, her mother held her hand with excessive force, as if fearing she might run away at any moment. On the other side, her father kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, avoiding eye contact with his daughter. 3 weeks earlier, Emily had been informed that she would be given away as a wife to a farmer in rural Pennsylvania. There had been no proposal, no courtship, just an agreement sealed between her father and a man she had never seen. The reason was simple and painful. She was considered infertile. 6 different doctors in the city of Lancaster had confirmed it. Her mother kept the medical reports as if they were certificates of shame, showing them to any suitor who showed interest, always with the same rehearsed speech about how Emily would be a good wife anyway, a great cook, accomplished, obedient. With each rejection, Emily felt a piece of herself die. At 23, she was already seen as a spinster, a broken woman no decent man would want. When Nathan Miller, the farmer, accepted the agreement, she felt no relief. She only felt the emptiness of knowing she would be accepted not for who she was, but despite her condition. The farm appeared on the horizon after 4 hours of travel. It was larger than Emily had imagined, with vast fields of golden wheat swaying in the wind, and a sturdy wooden house surrounded by ancient trees. Near the porch, 3 figures waited. Emily recognized the man in the center from her mother's description. Tall, broad-shouldered, with slightly unruly brown hair, wearing a green shirt faded from work. Nathan Miller was around 35, his face weathered by the sun, and an expression that revealed nothing. Beside him stood a much older man with a thick white beard and a black hat leaning on a cane. On the other side, a blonde woman in a yellow dress watched everything with poorly concealed curiosity. The wagon stopped. Emily's father got down first, helping his wife next. Emily remained seated for a moment, her legs trembling under the layers of fabric in her dress. When she finally stepped down, she almost stumbled, but managed to steady herself before falling. "Nathan Miller," said the farmer, extending his hand to Emily's father. His voice was deep, controlled. "We received your correspondence." "Richard Wilson," replied the father, shaking hands with excessive firmness. "This is my wife, Margaret, and our daughter, Emily." Nathan nodded briefly to the mother before finally looking at Emily. His eyes were dark brown, almost black, and carried a weight she couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger. It wasn't contempt. It was something closer to resignation. "Welcome," he said without smiling. "This is my father, William Miller, and our neighbor, Rebecca Johnson." The old William tilted his head, but said nothing. Rebecca, on the other hand, stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a pleasure to meet you, Emily," she said, examining her from head to toe. "Nathan mentioned we'd have a new resident on the property." There was something in Rebecca's tone that bothered Emily immediately, but she just smiled politely and lowered her gaze. "Let's go inside," suggested Nathan. "I've prepared coffee." The house was spacious inside, with simple but well-kept furniture. The main room had a large wooden table surrounded by chairs, a stone fireplace, and wide windows that let in plenty of light. It smelled of pine and wood smoke. As everyone settled in, Emily noticed that Rebecca sat too close to Nathan, casually touching his arm as if she had a right to it. The farmer didn't seem to notice, or simply ignored it. Margaret didn't waste any time. As soon as coffee was served, she placed a leather folder on the table, opening it to reveal several documents. "As agreed in our correspondence," she began, with the firm voice of someone who had rehearsed that speech many times, "Emily was examined by 6 different doctors. They all confirmed the same condition. We brought the reports for you to verify." Emily felt her face burn. There she was, her privacy being exposed in front of strangers, like cattle being evaluated before purchase. Nathan took the documents but barely looked at them before handing them back. "Not necessary," he said indifferently. "I was already aware of the situation when I accepted the agreement. So you understand then," continued Margaret as if she hadn't been interrupted, "that this is a practical union. Emily is a good worker. She can take care of the house, cook, assist with property chores. But there won't be—" I understand perfectly, Nathan cut in firmly. He turned to Emily for the first time since they entered the house. I need someone to help manage this property. My father is aging and can no longer do what he used to. You'll be here to work. Nothing beyond that, is that clear? Emily swallowed hard and nodded, unable to find words. The coldness in his voice was like a punch to the gut. As for the payment, began Richard, quickly changing the subject. It will be done as agreed, interrupted Nathan. Half now, half when you complete 6 months of marriage. If there are any problems before that, the agreement is cancelled and she returns. No refund of the amount already paid. It was like a business contract. Emily wasn't a bride, she was a commodity with a warranty period. Rebecca watched everything with a subtle smile at the corner of her lips, slowly drinking her coffee. William remained silent, looking out the window as if he wanted to be anywhere else. The wedding took place the next day, in a simple ceremony at the small chapel of the nearest village. The priest was old and hurried, murmuring the ritual words like someone reciting a cake recipe. Emily wore the same burgundy dress from the trip, as she had no other suitable one. Nathan wore a clean shirt and dark pants, but his expression remained distant. There was no party. There was no celebration. Just signatures on documents and the sound of the pen scratching paper. When they returned to the farm, Emily's parents had already left. They didn't even say goodbye properly. They left their daughter like someone leaving a package and continued their journey back to Lancaster, taking with them the first installment of the payment. William showed Emily her room, a small space at the back of the house, separated from Nathan's room by a hallway and a living room. The message was clear. This was an arrangement of convenience, not intimacy. Coffee is served at 6 in the morning, the old man informed her, his voice hoarse and tired. Nathan wakes up at 5 to tend to the animals. He expects the house to be organized and meals prepared. If you need anything, there's a task list in the kitchen. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of reality fall upon her. She wasn't a wife. She was an employee who happened to have a marriage certificate. That first night she lay in the narrow bed, staring at the wooden ceiling, and finally let the tears fall. She cried silently, biting the pillow to avoid making noise. She cried for the life she would never have, for the children she would never carry, for the man who accepted her only because she came with a discount tag. But there was no time for self-pity. At dawn, there would be work to do. The first days were a succession of endless tasks. Emily woke before sunrise to make coffee, then cleaned the house, washed clothes in the tub behind the kitchen, prepared lunch, tended to the chickens, harvested vegetables from the garden, made dinner, and finally collapsed exhausted into bed when the night was already late. Nathan barely spoke to her. He gave short orders in the morning about what needed to be done and disappeared into the fields until dusk. When he returned, he ate in silence, briefly thanked her for the food and withdrew to his room. William was kinder, occasionally making some comment about the weather or praising the seasoning of a dish, but he also kept his distance. The only person who seemed interested in talking was Rebecca, who appeared at the farm with a disturbing frequency. She always had an excuse. She brought fresh eggs, came to borrow flour, wanted to talk about the harvest. But Emily noticed how she looked at Nathan, how she found reasons to touch him, how she laughed too loudly at anything he said. In the second week, while Emily was hanging clothes on the line, Rebecca appeared without warning, bringing a basket of bread. "I thought you might like some," she said, handing over the basket with a smile that didn't match her tone of voice. "It must be hard to adjust to all this." "Thank you," replied Emily, taking the basket. "That's kind of you." "Nathan and I have known each other for many years," Rebecca continued, uninvited into the conversation. "We grew up together. Our families have always been close. Some say we should have married, but, well, life takes strange turns, doesn't it?" Emily felt her discomfort growing but didn't respond. "He's a good man," Rebecca went on, eyeing the clothes on the line as if assessing the quality of Emily's work. "But closed off, hard to get to know. I think you'll find that out in time." "I've already noticed he prefers silence," said Emily, trying to end the conversation. "Oh, it's not just that," Rebecca gave an enigmatic smile. "Nathan carries things he'd rather not share, secrets, old wounds. But don't worry, I'm sure he'll open up eventually. Before Emily could respond, Rebecca turned and walked toward the fields where Nathan was working, leaving Emily alone with a discomfort she couldn't name. That night, while preparing dinner, Emily decided to break the silence that dominated their meals. "Rebecca came by today," she said, placing the stew plate in front of Nathan. "She brought bread." Nathan didn't look up from his plate. "She does that," he replied simply, starting to eat. "She seems close to you." This time he looked at her with an expression Emily couldn't decipher. "Rebecca has been my neighbor for a long time. Our properties border each other. It's natural for her to stop by sometimes." "Of course." Emily focused back on her own food, feeling she had crossed some invisible line. The silence returned, heavier than before. It was in the third week that Emily began to feel something strange. She woke up nauseous, a horrible feeling that made her run outside the house and vomit behind the nearest tree. She thought she had eaten something bad, maybe a spoiled egg or poorly preserved meat. But the nausea returned the next day, and the next, and the next. She tried to hide it, waking up even earlier to have time to deal with the sickness before anyone noticed. But it was hard. The dizziness came in waves, along with a weakness that made even the simplest tasks exhausting. William was the first to notice. "You look pale," he commented one morning watching Emily make coffee. "Are you eating properly?" "Yes, I am," she lied, holding firmly onto the edge of the stove. "Just a little tired." The old man studied her for a long moment, but didn't press further. Nathan, as always, seemed oblivious to everything that didn't involve the farm work. He spent most of his days in the fields, preparing the soil for the next planting. Emily hardly saw him, except during meals, and even then he was always distracted, thinking about numbers and harvests. But the nausea wouldn't go away. If anything, it got worse. Emily began having trouble eating. The smell of certain foods made her queasy. She constantly lost her appetite and had to force herself to swallow anything to keep up her strength. It was Rebecca, ironically, who planted the first seed of suspicion. She appeared one Thursday afternoon, finding Emily sitting on the porch, trying to catch her breath after a particularly strong bout of nausea. "You don't look well," observed Rebecca, climbing the steps uninvited. "I can see from afar." "Just a cold?" Emily forced a smile. "Nothing serious?" Rebecca sat beside her, too close, studying her face with an uncomfortable intensity. "Morning sickness?" and she asked, with a tone that was too casual. Emily stared at her, surprised. "How did you—" "I recognize the signs," interrupted Rebecca with a strange smile. "My sister had 3 children. I know what a pregnant woman looks like." Emily's world stopped. Pregnant. The word echoed in her mind like a distant shout. Impossible. 6 doctors had confirmed she could never have children. Her mother had kept those reports as irrefutable proof. Besides, she and Nathan they didn't even sleep in the same room. "That's impossible," said Emily, feeling her voice tremble. "I can't." "The doctors said—" "Doctors make mistakes," replied Rebecca, standing up. "Or maybe there are things they didn't tell you. Either way, you'd better check. There's a midwife in the village, Mrs. Martha. She can confirm it." Before Emily could respond, Rebecca was already descending the steps, leaving her alone with a thought that refused to leave her head. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, her hands on her belly, trying to feel any difference. But there was nothing. Just the growing fear that Rebecca might be right, and the terror of what that would mean. If she were pregnant, and she couldn't be, but if she were, it would destroy everything. Nathan had accepted her precisely because she couldn't have children. It was part of the agreement. If she appeared pregnant now, after only 3 weeks of marriage, a marriage that wasn't even real in the most basic sense, he could only conclude one thing: that she had betrayed him, that there was another man, that she had deceived everyone. Emily squeezed her eyes shut tightly, feeling the tears wet the pillow. There was no other man. There never had been. She barely left the house when she lived with her parents. But who would believe her? The medical reports would say she was sterile. The absence of any intimacy with Nathan would prove he wasn't the father. She would be called a liar, a deceiver, A sob escaped her throat before she could contain it. Another followed. And then she was crying openly, burying her face in the pillow to muffle the sound, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't notice the presence until she felt a hand on her shoulder. Emily turned quickly, wiping her face any which way. Nathan was there, standing by the bed, wearing only pants and a simple undershirt, his hair messy from sleep. The moonlight came through the window, creating shadows on his face. "I heard," he began, seeming uncomfortable. "You were—" "Sorry." Emily sat up in bed, trying to regain her composure. "I didn't mean to wake you. I'm fine now." "You can go back to your room." But Nathan didn't move. He stayed there, watching her with that unreadable expression she was beginning to know. "You're not well," he said, not as a question but as a statement. "My father mentioned you've been pale. Rebecca also said you look sick." Of course Rebecca mentioned. "It's just fatigue." Emily tried to smile but failed miserably. "I'm still adjusting to the routine." "You're lying." The statement was so direct that Emily was left speechless. Nathan pulled the only chair in the room and sat down, his eyes fixed on her. "I'm not good at many things," he continued, his voice low but firm. "But I grew up on a farm. I can tell when an animal is sick, when something's wrong, and something's wrong with you." "There's nothing wrong," insisted Emily, but her voice came out too weak to be convincing. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "Tomorrow," said Nathan, standing up, "we're going to the doctor in Allentown. It's not a suggestion." "There's no need," Emily began to protest, but he interrupted her. "Yes, there is. You work on my property now. It's my responsibility to make sure you're healthy. We'll leave right after breakfast. Be ready." With that, he left the room, closing the door behind him and leaving Emily alone with her growing panic. The trip to Allentown took over 2 hours by wagon. Nathan remained silent the entire way, holding the reins firmly as the horses moved along the dirt road. Emily sat beside him, her hands clasped in her lap, her stomach churning with a mix of nausea and anxiety. Dr. Thomas Brown's office was in a modest house in the center of the small town. He was one of the few doctors in the area, serving farmers and residents of the surrounding villages. The waiting room had only 3 chairs and smelled strongly of alcohol and medicinal herbs. An older woman greeted them, likely the doctor's nurse or assistant. She looked from Nathan to Emily with poorly concealed curiosity, clearly trying to understand the relationship between them. "The doctor can see you in a few minutes," she said, pointing to the chairs. "What's the problem?" "My wife isn't feeling well," replied Nathan, and Emily noticed how the word wife sounded strange on his lips, as if it were the first time he'd said it aloud. They sat down. Time dragged on. Emily could feel Nathan beside her, stiff and uncomfortable. He clearly didn't like being there, away from the farm, dealing with matters he probably considered a waste of time. Finally, the office door opened, and a middle-aged man with graying hair and small glasses called them in. "You can come in." The office was even smaller than the waiting room. A desk, 2 chairs for patients, a cot covered with a white sheet, and shelves full of bottles and medical instruments. "Mr. and Mrs. Dr. Thomas checked a paper. "Miller. What brings you here today?" Nathan gestured for Emily to speak. She swallowed dryly, her hands trembling slightly. "I've been having nausea," she began, "mostly in the morning, and dizziness, and I've lost my appetite." The doctor nodded, taking notes. "How long has this been going on?" "About 2 weeks, maybe a little more." "Other symptoms? Fever, headache, abdominal pain?" "No. Just weakness and the nausea." Dr. Thomas looked at her over his glasses, then at Nathan. "How long have you been married?" 3 weeks, Nathan replied stiffly. The doctor nodded again, as if that information confirmed something he already suspected. "I'll need to examine her," he said, standing up. "Mr. Miller, you can wait outside, please." Nathan seemed to want to protest, but after a moment he nodded and left the office. The examination didn't take long. "Questions about your last menstrual cycle abdominal palpation, temperature check, and heart rate. Dr. Thomas Brown worked in silence, with precise and professional movements. When he finished, he returned behind his desk, taking off his glasses to clean them slowly. Emily remained seated in the chair, her heart beating so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "Mrs. Miller," he said finally, putting his glasses back on, "there's no doubt. You are pregnant. By my calculation, approximately 2 months." The world around Emily crumbled. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. It couldn't be, it couldn't be, it couldn't be. "This is impossible," she managed to say finally, her voice hoarse. "I'm sterile. 6 doctors in Lancaster examined me. All confirmed it. I have the reports." Dr. Thomas Brown observed her with curiosity. "Do you have those reports with you?" "No, but my mother kept them. She always said—" "Mrs. Miller," the doctor interrupted, not unkindly, "I understand this may be a shock, but the facts are clear. There are unmistakable signs of pregnancy. If you wish, I can perform a more detailed examination in another appointment, but I am certain of the diagnosis." Emily felt tears burning her eyes. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "My husband, he accepted me precisely because I couldn't have children. It was part of the agreement. If I show up pregnant now, he'll believe that I—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The tears finally fell, and she covered her face with her hands, feeling the humiliation burn her skin. Dr. Thomas Brown sighed, standing up to get a tissue, which he offered to her. "I believe this is a conversation you need to have with your husband," he said, more gently. "But I can assure you that you are pregnant, regardless of what the doctors in Lancaster may have said." Emily wiped her face, trying to breathe deeply. She needed to think. She needed to understand, but her mind was blank, only a constant buzz of panic. "May I ask one thing?" she said, still holding the tissue. "Is it possible that the other doctors were mistaken? All of them?" Dr. Thomas Brown sat back down, thoughtful. "It's rare, but not impossible. Diagnoses of sterility aren't always accurate, especially if based only on superficial physical exams. But 6 doctors reaching the same wrong conclusion, that's statistically unlikely." "So what you're saying is that I should have been able to get pregnant all along, that I was never sterile?" "It's a possibility," he admitted, "or there was some condition that resolved naturally. Or—" He paused, seeming to hesitate. "The reports your mother kept weren't accurate." The meaning of his words took a few seconds to process in Emily's mind. When she finally understood, she felt her stomach sink. "Are you implying that the reports were fake?" "I'm not implying anything, Mrs. Miller," the doctor said quickly, "just offering possibilities. But I suggest that if your mother still has those documents, it might be wise to examine them more closely." Emily couldn't respond. Her mind was spinning, processing, trying to fit together the pieces of a puzzle that made no sense. "Should I call your husband to inform him?" asked Dr. Thomas Brown. "No!" The answer came out louder than Emily intended. "No, please, I need to think. I need to find a way to—" "I'll tell him, but in my own way. Please." The doctor nodded, though he seemed doubtful. "As you wish. But I recommend you do it soon. You'll need proper care during the pregnancy, and that includes informing the child's father." The child's father. The words sounded absurd. Nathan wasn't the father. He couldn't be. They never— But then who was it? No one. There was no one. And yet, there she was, 2 months pregnant. 2 months. That meant that— Emily tried to count the months in her head, but she was too confused. 2 months ago, she was still in Lancaster, at her parents' house, practically a prisoner of her own fate. She didn't go out, didn't talk to anyone, had no contact with any man. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. She stumbled out of the doctor's office, the tissue still clutched in her hand. Nathan was in the waiting room, standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking at the street. He turned when he heard her come in, his eyes immediately seeking hers, looking for answers. "So?" he asked, his voice controlled but tense. "What did the doctor say?" Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. How could she explain? How could she say something she herself didn't understand? She began, her voice faltering. "Mrs. Miller needs rest," interrupted Dr. Thomas, appearing at the office door. He looked at Emily with clear meaning, a silent message. "And good nutrition. Nothing serious, but she's weakened and needs to take better care of herself. I recommend less heavy work for a while." Nathan nodded, seeming vaguely relieved. "So that's all. Tiredness." "For now," replied the doctor, keeping his gaze on Emily. "But I suggest she come back for a follow-up appointment in a few weeks." The return trip was even more silent than the way there. Nathan seemed thoughtful, probably worried about the farm and the work piling up in his absence. Emily walked beside him, her whole body rigid, hands clenched in her lap, trying to control the trembling. Pregnant. She was pregnant. It couldn't be, but it was. And soon she would start to show. There was no way to hide a pregnancy. Nathan would find out. Everyone would find out. And then what? Would she be thrown out? Sent back to her parents in disgrace? Accused of adultery, of deceiving her husband, of lying? When they reached the farm, the sun was already setting. William was waiting for them on the porch, obviously curious about their absence all day. "Everything all right?" he asked, as they got down from the wagon. "She needs more rest," replied Nathan, tying up the horses. "The doctor said she's been working too hard." That wasn't exactly what the doctor had said, but Emily didn't correct him. She carefully climbed the porch steps, feeling her legs weak. "I'll prepare dinner," she said, but Nathan stopped her with a gesture. "My father can do that today. Go rest." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Emily didn't have the energy to argue. She went to her room, closed the door, and finally let the weight of everything crash down on her. The following days were a blur of anxiety and nausea. Emily tried to continue with her normal tasks, but Nathan had instructed William not to let her do heavy work. The old man obeyed, although he seemed confused by his son's sudden concern. Rebecca naturally noticed the change. She showed up 2 days after the appointment, with her usual lack of invitation or prior notice. "So," she said, finding Emily picking vegetables in the garden, "you went to the doctor. What did he say?" Emily kept her eyes fixed on the plants. "Just tiredness. Nothing major." "Tiredness," repeated Rebecca, with a tone that made it clear she didn't believe it. "What a coincidence. What do you mean by that?" "Nothing." Rebecca shrugged, but there was a smile at the corner of her lips. "I just find it curious that Nathan is so attentive all of a sudden. He took you to the doctor himself. He's sparing you from heavy work. It almost seems like he's taking care of you." "He's just practical," replied Emily, pulling a carrot with more force than necessary. "He doesn't want to lose a worker through neglect." "Of course," agreed Rebecca, but her tone said otherwise. "It's just that, well, Nathan has never been one to show this kind of concern before, even with me, and we've known each other for years." Emily finally faced her. "What exactly are you trying to say, Rebecca?" The other woman stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm saying that perhaps you have more power in this situation than you think. Nathan accepted you thinking you'd be convenient, harmless. But now, well, things might have changed, haven't they?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Rebecca chuckled softly. "Oh, Emily, you may fool Nathan. You might even fool old William. But you don't fool me. I know what I saw that day on the porch. I know the signs. And I know you're hiding something." Emily's heart raced, but she forced herself to keep a neutral expression. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" Rebecca crouched beside her, so close that Emily could feel her breath. "Because from my point of view, it looks like you've managed to do something remarkable, something that goes against everything that was said about you. And I wonder, does Nathan know? Does he know the truth?" Emily stood up abruptly, knocking over the vegetable basket. "Get off my property." Rebecca stood up too, but without haste, that irritating smile still on her face. "Your property? How interesting for you to say that. 3 weeks ago, you were just a broken woman being handed over like a farm animal, and now you already feel like the owner of the place. What a quick change." "Get out," repeated Emily, louder this time. "I'm going. Rebecca started to walk away, but stopped to look over her shoulder. "But remember, Emily, secrets have a way of coming out, and when that happens, I'll be right here, waiting to see what Nathan does with you." She left, leaving Emily trembling with anger and fear. Rebecca knew. Somehow she knew, or strongly suspected, and from the way she spoke, she seemed determined to cause trouble. That night, Emily barely touched her food. Nathan noticed but didn't comment until William had retired to sleep. "You need to eat," he said, breaking his usual mealtime silence for the first time. "The doctor said you're getting weak." "I'm not hungry." "It's not a matter of being hungry." He pushed the plate closer to her. "It's a matter of staying healthy. Eat." Emily stared at him, surprised by the firm, but not exactly cruel tone. There was something different about Nathan that night. He seemed concerned. No, that was unlikely. Just practical, as always. "Why do you care?" The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Nathan seemed equally surprised. "As I said, it's practical. I can't have someone sick on the farm." "It's not just that," Emily insisted, feeling a sudden courage. "You've been different since we came back from the doctor. Why?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he got up and went to the window, hands in his pockets looking out into the darkness. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reluctant. "I accepted this arrangement because I thought it would be simple. Someone to help with the property, no complications, no expectations. But you're suffering. I can see that. And I don't feel right knowing I caused some of that suffering." Emily was speechless. It was the first time Nathan had expressed anything close to real feeling. "You didn't cause anything," she finally said. "I came of my own will." "Came?" He turned to face her. "Or were you brought? I saw how your parents handed you over, Emily, like a package, like something they wanted to get rid of. And I accepted because it was convenient. Because I needed help and you were the practical solution. But that doesn't mean I don't see, it doesn't mean I don't notice." Tears burned in Emily's eyes, but she forced herself to hold them back. "Why are you saying this now?" Nathan returned to the table but didn't sit down. Instead, he remained standing, hands gripping the chair back, his gaze fixed on her. "Because I'm not good at expressing these things. I never have been. But when I saw you crying that night, when I took you to the doctor and realized how frightened you were, I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want this house to be a prison for you." "Then what do you want?" asked Emily, her voice barely a whisper. "I want you to feel safe here, to know you can talk to me if something's wrong, that—" He paused as if the words were too difficult. "That you're not alone." It was a small gesture, a simple phrase, but for Emily, it meant more than any grand display could. For the first time since arriving at the farm, she felt a flicker of something that could become hope. But then she remembered the secret, the pregnancy, the impossibility of the whole situation, and that hope vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Thank you," she said, looking away. "That means a lot." Nathan nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional weight of the conversation. He withdrew shortly after, wishing her good night with his usual formality. Emily was left alone in the kitchen, staring at the plate of cold food, wondering how long she could maintain the lie, how long until her body revealed what she couldn't say. The answer came sooner than she expected. A week later, Emily woke up feeling something different. It wasn't nausea, though that was still present. It was a kind of pressure in her lower abdomen, a feeling of fullness that hadn't been there before. She got out of bed and went to the small cracked mirror on the wall. Her dress was slightly tighter around the waist, just a little, almost unnoticeable. But it was there, the beginning of the physical evidence she couldn't hide forever. Panic, pure panic seized her. In a few weeks, maybe a month, it would be impossible to disguise. Everyone would see, everyone would know, and then what? She spent the entire day in a state of constant anxiety, making small mistakes that weren't typical for her. She spilled oil while cooking, broke a plate while drying it, forgot to feed the chickens until William mentioned it. Nathan was in the fields all day, so he didn't see her state, but that evening when he returned, one look was enough to notice something was very wrong. "You're shaking," he observed as she served dinner. "Do you have a fever?" "No, I just—" Emily tried to smile but failed. "Just a difficult day." "Sit down," he ordered, pulling out a chair. "My father can serve." "There's no need, Sit down, Emily." There was no room for argument in his tone. She obeyed, sitting down carefully, her hands trembling in her lap. William, perceptive as always, served dinner without comment, but she could feel both men's eyes on her, worried and confused. The meal proceeded in uncomfortable silence. Emily barely touched her food, her stomach too unsettled to accept anything. When William finally withdrew, Nathan didn't waste time. "What's going on?" he asked firmly. "And don't tell me it's nothing, because it clearly isn't." Emily opened her mouth, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain? How could she reveal something so impossible? "Emily," Nathan leaned forward, his eyes locked on her. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I said you're not alone, and I meant it." The tears finally overflowed. She couldn't hold them back any longer. They streamed down her face as she covered it with her hands, her body shaking with sobs she tried to contain. Nathan seemed completely at a loss. He stood up, took a few uncertain steps, clearly not knowing what to do. Finally, he approached and placed a hesitant hand on her shoulder. "Emily." His voice was softer now, almost gentle. "Please, tell me what's wrong." Between sobs, between tears that wouldn't stop falling, Emily finally spoke the words she had feared saying ever since Dr. Thomas Brown had said them to her. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was absolute. Emily could hear her own heart beating, could hear Nathan's breath stopping, could feel the whole world freezing in that moment. When she finally dared to look up, she saw Nathan a few steps back, his expression completely unreadable. Shock, confusion. And then, slowly, something darker began to appear. "What?" His voice was low, dangerously low. "I'm pregnant," repeated Emily, the words coming out in a broken whisper. The doctor confirmed it. 2 months. Nathan continued to stare at her, as if she were speaking a foreign language. Then he started counting on his fingers, his expression growing harder. 2 months, he repeated. 2 months ago you were still in Lancaster, still with your family. And now... He stopped, the realization hitting him like a punch. "And now you're telling me you're pregnant." "I know how this looks." Emily stood up, desperate. "I know what you must be thinking, but..." "You know what I'm thinking?" Nathan interrupted, his voice rising. "Do you?" William appeared in the kitchen doorway, alert to the raised tone. "What's going on here?" Nathan didn't take his eyes off Emily. "Tell him," he ordered coldly. "Tell my father what you just told me." "Nathan, please." "Tell her!" Emily recoiled, frightened by the fury in his voice. With trembling lips, she turned to William. "I'm expecting a baby." The old man looked momentarily confused, then surprised, and finally, something close to joy began to appear on his face. But upon seeing Nathan's expression, that joy quickly died. This is wonderful, isn't it?" he tried, but his voice lacked conviction. "Wonderful," Nathan laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "She's 2 months pregnant, Dad. 2 months. We've been married for 4 weeks. Do the math." Understanding fell upon William like a stone. He looked from Nathan to Emily, his mouth opening but no words coming out. "It's not what you're thinking," Emily begged, tears still falling. "Please, you have to believe me." "Believe you?" Nathan took steps toward her and she instinctively backed away. "You've lied from day one, you and your family. You tricked me." "No, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "How could you not know?" he shouted, completely losing his composure. "How could you not know you were pregnant? Whose is it? Who's the father?" "I don't know," Emily shouted back, her own frustration finally exploding. "I don't know how this happened. I don't know who. I've never been with anyone." "Liar! I'm not lying." "You were in Lancaster 2 months ago," Nathan continued, relentless. "Who were you with? What man? Some boyfriend you left behind? Someone your family hid from me?" "There was no one. I barely left the house. I didn't..." Then how? He cut her off, his voice breaking with anger and pain. How, Emily? How are you pregnant if you claim to be sterile? How are you pregnant if you've never been with anyone? Do you think I'm stupid? Emily was sobbing now, barely able to breathe between tears. The reports, she managed to say. The medical reports. They said I could never have children. My mother had the documents. She showed them to me. I never questioned. Obviously they were fake, Nathan spat. Your family sent you here knowing you were pregnant, knowing I'd be stupid enough to accept it. And you were part of this plan from the beginning. No! Emily screamed, desperate. I wasn't. I didn't know. Please, you have to believe. Enough! Nathan turned around, his hands in his hair, clearly struggling to control his anger. Enough! I don't want to hear another word. Nathan! William tried to intervene, his voice calm but firm. Perhaps we should... You're defending her, Dad. Nathan turned to the old man, his eyes blazing. After everything you've heard, you still think there's any reasonable explanation for this? I'm saying that perhaps we should hear the whole story before... The story is clear. Nathan slammed his hand on the table, making dishes and silverware jump. She was pregnant when she arrived here. She and her family deceived me. They made a fool of me. And now she wants me to believe it's some kind of miracle that she's a pregnant virgin? The sarcasm in his voice was like a knife. Emily flinched, feeling every word like a physical blow. I'm leaving, she said, her voice coming out weak. I'm leaving tomorrow morning. You don't have to look at me anymore. You're not going anywhere, Nathan replied, but there was no kindness in the statement. Early tomorrow, the three of us are going to Lancaster. We're going to have a very interesting conversation with your family, and they will tell me the truth even if I have to pry every word from their lying throats. He left the kitchen with heavy steps, slamming his bedroom door so hard the walls shook. Emily collapsed in the chair, burying her face in her hands. William approached slowly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. He's angry, said the old man, his voice heavy with sadness. But anger passes. The truth always comes out in the end. But this is the truth. Emily looked at him through her tears. I swear, William, I've never been with anyone. I don't understand how this happened. But I'm not lying. The old man studied her for a long moment, his eyes tired but kind. I believe you, he said finally, and those simple words meant more to Emily than anything else in that horrible moment. I don't know how, but I believe you, and somehow we will find out the truth. But Emily didn't share his optimism. As she dragged herself to her room that night, all she could feel was despair. Nathan would never believe her. Her family would reveal their lies, and then she would be cast out, branded a deceiver, condemned to live the rest of her life in shame. She lay on the bed, her hands on her belly where an impossible life was growing, and cried until she had no tears left. The dawn came too early. Emily had barely slept, spending the night alternating between bouts of crying and periods of emotional numbness. When she finally managed to doze off, she dreamed of Nathan's face twisted in anger, accusing her repeatedly. Firm knocks on the door woke her. It was William. Emily, he called, his voice soft but urgent. Nathan already has the wagon ready. He wants to leave in half an hour. She got up, feeling her body heavy and sore. She dressed quickly, taking only a small bag with a few clothes. She didn't know if she would return, so she saw no point in taking much. Nathan was on the porch when she came out, checking the wagon straps. He didn't look at her as she approached. His face was closed, his jaw tight, every line of his body radiating contained anger. The trip to Lancaster would take all day. 4 hours there, time to confront Emily's family, and another 4 hours back. Emily sat in the wagon, as far away from Nathan as possible, who took the reins without a word. William decided to go along, perhaps sensing that his presence might be needed. He sat between the two, creating a physical barrier that mirrored the emotional one that already existed. The path was the same one Emily had traveled 4 weeks earlier, but it seemed completely different now. On that journey, she was leaving a life behind. On this one, she was going to confront the lies that had built her present. They stopped only once to rest the horses and drink water from a creek. Nathan continued to refuse to look at Emily or speak a word to her. It was as if she didn't exist to him. It was William who finally broke the silence well into the second half of the trip. "Nathan," he said carefully, "no matter what we discover today, you must control your anger. We can't solve anything with violence or—" "I'm not going to hit anyone, Father," Nathan interrupted, his voice tense, "but they will tell me the truth, all of it. And if I need to threaten with lawyers, with returning money, with whatever it takes, I will do it." Emily said nothing. There was nothing she could say that she hadn't already tried the night before. She just looked out at the passing landscape, feeling a kind of numbness take over her. It was easier not to feel anything than to deal with the pain. When they finally reached Lancaster, the sun was beginning to set. Emily's parents' house was on the outskirts of town, a simple wooden structure with a small garden in front. Emily felt a tightness in her chest upon seeing it. She had grown up there, but it had never been a real home. It had always been more of a prison disguised as a family. Nathan stopped the wagon in front of the house and got down without waiting for the others. He marched to the door and knocked hard, 3 knocks that echoed like thunder. Richard opened the door, surprised to see his son-in-law there. His surprise quickly turned to alarm when he saw the expression on Nathan's face. "Mr. Miller," he began, "what an unexpected pleasure." "This isn't a social call," Nathan cut him off. "Is your wife home?" "She is, but—" "Call her. Now." The tone left no room for argument. Richard stepped back, allowing Nathan to enter, followed by William and lastly Emily, who felt as if she were marching to her own execution. The living room of the house was small and modest, with old furniture and faded curtains. Margaret appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a cloth. Her face paled when she saw her daughter. "Emily, what are you doing?" Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. "Sit down," Nathan ordered, pointing to the sofa. "Both of you, now." Richard and Margaret exchanged nervous glances but obeyed. Nathan remained standing, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. William positioned himself near the door, as if guarding the exit. Emily stood in a corner, wishing she could disappear. "I'll be direct," Nathan began, his voice dangerously calm. "Emily is pregnant, 2 months. What do you have to say about that?" The silence that followed was heavy. Margaret opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. Richard paled even more, if that was possible. That can't be," Margaret finally stammered. The doctors said she was sterile," Nathan completed with sarcasm. "Yes, I know. You showed me the reports. I trusted those reports. I accepted Emily based on those reports. So now I want to know, were the reports fake?" "No." Margaret stood up, indignant. "How dare you accuse us of—" "Sit down!" Nathan roared, and she fell back onto the sofa as if her legs had given way. "I'll ask again, and this time I want the truth. Were the reports fake?" "We didn't fake anything," Richard said, his voice trembling. "The doctors really examined Emily. They really said she couldn't have children." "But she is," Nathan pointed out. "Clearly those diagnoses were wrong. And you knew about this, didn't you? You knew she was pregnant when you handed her over to me." "We didn't know." Margaret was crying now. "How could we have known? She was always at home, never went out, never—" She stopped, realizing too late where her words were leading. "Never what?" pressed Nathan. "Never been with any man, is that what you were about to say? Because that raises an interesting question. How did she get pregnant then?" "I don't know," shouted Margaret. "But it wasn't our fault. We didn't lie about anything." "Then let's talk about these medical reports." Nathan took a threatening step toward them. "Where are they? I want to see them. I want the doctors' names, the office addresses. I'm going to visit each one and verify if these documents are legitimate." Margaret and Richard exchanged another look, this one more desperate than the last. It was Richard who finally spoke, his voice coming out weak. "The documents, they were with Margaret. She handled all of Emily's medical matters." All eyes turned to Margaret. She was pale, her hands shaking in her lap. She began, but the words died in her throat. "Where are the documents, Margaret?" asked William, his voice gentle but firm. "If there's nothing to hide, just show them." Margaret opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Tears began to stream down her face, and then, finally, the truth began to unravel. I needed to make sure she got married, she said barely above a whisper. Emily was getting too old. No man wanted a woman without a dowry, without special beauty, with nothing to offer. But if I said she was sterile, some men would accept. Men who needed help on the property but didn't want children. Men like you. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Emily felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Nathan stood completely still, processing what he had just heard. Richard covered his face with his hands, murmuring something unintelligible. "Are you saying—" Nathan spoke slowly, as if each word had to be pulled out with effort. "That you lied about your daughter being sterile to get her married?" "It was the only way." Margaret was sobbing now. "No one wanted her. We didn't have money for a dowry. She was going to stay with us forever, a burden, a disgrace. I was desperate." "So you forged medical reports," continued Nathan, his voice rising with each word. "Created an elaborate lie, deceived me, deceived your own daughter." "I didn't forge them." Margaret defended herself, desperate. "I just interpreted what the doctors said differently. They said it would be difficult for her to get pregnant. Not impossible, but You turned difficult into impossible," finished William, his voice filled with disgust. "You lied to your daughter about her own body, made her believe she was broken. Defective." Emily was listening to everything as if she were underwater. The words came distorted, strange. Her mother had lied. All those years of shame, of feeling less than other women, of believing she was defective, all based on lies. "Emily." Richard finally spoke, removing his hands from his face. "Daughter, we didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted you to have a life, a husband." "You wanted to get rid of me." Emily heard her own voice, surprisingly calm. "I was a burden, a failure, so you made up a story that would make me acceptable to men who didn't really want me." "It's not like that," began Margaret. "It's exactly like that," exploded Emily, years of pain finally overflowing. "You made me believe I was worthless, that my only value would be in labor because I could never be a mother. You lied about something so fundamental and never—" His voice broke. "You never felt remorse, did you?" Margaret was now crying inconsolably, but didn't answer. Richard kept his gaze fixed on the floor, shame clear in every line of his face. "There's more," said Nathan, his sharp voice cutting through the moment. "Emily is pregnant. So either your lie proved she could have children all along, or—" He paused, his eyes narrowing. "There's something else you're not telling us. She said she's never been with anyone. Is that true?" "Yes," Margaret confirmed quickly. "She never went out alone, never had boyfriends. We watched her constantly." "Then how is she 2 months pregnant?" pressed Nathan. "She was still here 2 months ago, under your care, under your watch, so either you're lying about the watch or—" He stopped, a horrible thought clearly crossing his mind. "Or what, Nathan?" asked William, also catching the implication in the unspoken words. Nathan turned to Richard, his eyes dark and dangerous. "Was there any man in this house? Someone who had access to Emily?" The question hung in the air like a threat. Richard looked up, and for a moment something passed over his face. Guilt, fear, knowledge. "Richard," William's voice was low, warning. "If there's anything you know, anything that could explain this situation, you'd better speak now." The man opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Margaret interrupted him. "My brother," she said quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush. "My brother lived here. For a few months. He had lost his job in Reading and needed a place to stay." The blood froze in Emily's veins. Her uncle, Robert. She had completely forgotten about him. He had stayed with them for 3 months, sleeping in the small guest room. He was quiet, kept to himself, rarely spoke to anyone. "When was he here?" asked Nathan, his voice dangerously calm. "From February to April," answered Margaret, trembling. "But he never did anything inappropriate. Robert is a respectable man. He would never touch Emily that way." But even she didn't seem convinced by her own words. Richard had gone completely pale, as if he had just realized something terrible. "Where is he now?" asked Nathan. "He went back to Reading," said Richard, his voice hoarse. "Got another job. He left 2 weeks before Emily got married." Nathan turned to Emily, studying her face. "Do you remember him? Remember your uncle being here?" Emily nodded slowly, feeling nausea rise again, but this time it wasn't from the pregnancy. "I remember. But we never—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the horror of the implication too much to process. "Emily," William approached her, his voice gentle. "You need to think carefully. Was there any time you were alone with him? Any time he did something inappropriate?" Emily closed her eyes, trying to remember. Robert was a quiet presence in the house. He woke up early, went out looking for work, came back late. She barely spoke to him, hardly saw him, except a memory surfaced, hazy and uncomfortable. One night, she had woken up thirsty, went down to the kitchen, finding Robert there, drinking. He had offered her a glass, saying it would help her sleep better. She had drunk it, returned to her room. And then there was nothing. A black hole in her memories. She woke up the next morning in her bed, feeling strange, sore in a way she couldn't explain, but she thought maybe she had slept in a bad position. "Emily?" William's voice brought her back to the present. "Did you remember something?" She opened her eyes, feeling tears burn. "I don't know. Maybe. There was one night, but I don't remember anything except—" She stopped, the realization hitting her like a train. "Oh God! Oh my God!" Nathan saw the change in her expression and immediately understood. "What?" He was by her side in 2 steps. "What did you remember?" With a trembling voice, Emily told him about that night, the drink Robert offered her, the gap in her memories, the strange feeling she had the next morning. As the words came out, she saw Nathan's expression shift from anger to something much more complex. Horror, understanding, and then, strangely, something that might have been guilt. When she finished, the silence in the room was suffocating. Margaret was sobbing on the couch. Richard had covered his face again. William seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "Does this mean," Nathan began, his voice hoarse, "that you didn't know? You really didn't know?" Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. The truth was too horrible. If her memories were correct, if that night meant what everyone seemed to think it meant, then everything made sense in a sick and terrible way. "What's his address in Reading?" Nathan asked, turning sharply to Richard. "Where can I find your brother-in-law?" "Why?" Richard asked, finally looking up. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make him admit what he did," Nathan replied, his voice icy, "and then I'll decide whether to turn him over to the authorities or handle it my own way." "No," Emily spoke for the first time since she started remembering. "No. Please." Nathan looked at her, surprised. "Why not? If he did what we think he did—" "Because it won't change anything," Emily interrupted, tears finally falling. "It won't change the fact that I'm pregnant. It won't change the fact that my parents lied. It won't change anything that's already happened. And I can't take any more confrontations. I can't take any more anger. Please, I just want to get out of here." She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands, her whole body shaking with sobs she no longer tried to control. William approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Let's go home," he said softly. "We've found out what we needed to know." Nathan seemed to want to argue, his jaw tight, his fists still clenched. But looking at Emily, seeing her so broken and lost, something in him gave way. He nodded slowly. "You," he pointed at Margaret and Richard, "will never contact her again. You will never come to my property again. And the money we paid for the wedding, consider it compensation for the damage you caused, because if I could, I'd take every penny from you and more." "Nathan!" Margaret tried to speak, reaching out pleadingly. "No," he cut her off coldly. "You have nothing to say that I want to hear. You spent your whole lives lying to her, making her believe she was less than she was. You used her as a bargaining chip, and when she needed you, needed protection, you let something horrible happen under your own roof." He turned to Emily, and his voice softened. "Let's go. You don't need to be here anymore." Emily stood up with difficulty, her legs feeling weak. William helped her, offering his arm for support. As they walked out, she heard Margaret calling her name, but she didn't look back. There was nothing back there for her, only lies and pain. The ride back was silent, but it was a different silence from that morning. It was no longer filled with anger and accusation. It was heavy with understanding, with realization, with a kind of sadness that had no words. Nathan drove the wagon with steady hands, but his face was thoughtful. William kept a protective arm around Emily, who huddled against him, too exhausted to cry anymore. When they finally reached the farm, it was already dawn. The stars shone in the clear sky, indifferent to the human drama unfolding below. William took Emily inside, making her a hot tea that she drank mechanically. Nathan disappeared into the stables, probably tending to the horses, but Emily suspected he needed time alone to process everything. "Rest," said William, as Emily finished her tea. "Tomorrow we'll talk about what to do now, but today you just need to rest." Emily nodded, going to her room like an automaton. She lay on the bed without taking off her clothes, staring at the ceiling, feeling completely empty. She wasn't angry anymore, she wasn't scared anymore, she was just empty, as if all emotions had been drained from her, leaving only a shell. Sleep finally claimed her, heavy and dreamless. She woke with the sun already high. Her body ached, as if she had run for miles. It took a few moments to remember everything that had happened the day before, and when she did, the pain came back in waves. But there was something different. The crushing weight of guilt had lessened. She wasn't a traitor. She hadn't deceived Nathan willingly. She was as much a victim as he was. When she finally left the room, she found William in the kitchen, making coffee. He smiled when he saw her, a sad but kind smile. "Nathan is out in the fields," he said, before she could ask. "He left before dawn. He needs to think, I believe." "Is he still angry?" asked Emily, her voice hoarse from crying the night before. "Angry?" William paused, considering. "Yes, but not at you, at the whole situation, at your parents, at your uncle, at having failed to protect you in some way, even though it wasn't his responsibility." "He didn't fail at anything," said Emily, sitting at the table. "He couldn't have known." "That's what I told him." William poured coffee for both of them. "But my son, he tends to carry guilt that isn't his. He's always been like that since he was a child." Emily took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through her body. "What's going to happen now?" she asked. "With everything?" William sighed, sitting down across from her. "That's something you and Nathan need to decide together. But I can tell you one thing. You will always have a place here, Emily. No matter what happens, no matter what decisions are made, you are not alone." Tears burned in Emily's eyes again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. The day passed slowly. Emily tried to return to her usual tasks, but William wouldn't let her. He insisted that she rest, that she read, that she do anything but work. She ended up spending most of the time on the porch, watching the fields, waiting for Nathan's return. He came back at dusk, covered in sweat and dust from work. When he saw Emily on the porch, he stopped, looking uncertain. For a long moment they just looked at each other, the space between them full of unspoken words. Finally, Nathan climbed the steps, but didn't enter the house. Instead, he sat on the edge of the porch next to where Emily was sitting in the rocking chair. "I need to apologize," he said, his voice low, "for what I said yesterday, for how I reacted. I accused you of terrible things without giving you a chance to explain." "You didn't know," replied Emily. "How could you have known?" "Even so." He looked at his own hands, dirty with soil. "I have no excuse for being so cruel. You were scared, needing help, and I was the opposite of what I should have been. You were angry, it's understandable. Anger doesn't justify cruelty." Silence fell between them again, but it was a more comfortable silence than before. Finally, Emily gathered the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind all day. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "About all of this?" Nathan was quiet for a long time. When he finally answered, his voice was careful, measured. "I've spent the whole day thinking about it. About all the options. About what's right, what's practical, what's human." He paused, running his hand through his hair. "And I've reached some conclusions. First, you're as much a victim in this situation as I am, maybe more. Your own family's made you suffer and put you in a horrible position." Emily felt her chest tighten. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Second," continued Nathan, "we're legally married. That's a fact that doesn't change, regardless of the circumstances that brought us here." "We can annul it," suggested Emily, her voice coming out in a whisper. "If you want, I'd understand." "Third," he said, as if she hadn't spoken, "you're expecting a child who didn't ask to exist, who isn't to blame for anything that happened. This child will need a roof, food, care." "I can leave," Emily said quickly. "I can find work somewhere. I can—" "Fourth," Nathan's voice grew firmer, "I'm not the kind of man who abandons responsibilities. And I took on a responsibility when I agreed to this marriage, even if under false pretenses. You're under my care now, Emily, and that's not going to change." Emily finally looked at him, surprised. "What are you saying?" Nathan turned to face her, his eyes dark but not cruel. "I'm saying you're staying here, you and the child. We'll find a way to make this work, whatever working means in this messy situation." "But you don't have to. I don't expect you to—" "I know what you don't expect," he interrupted, "and maybe eventually we can come to some kind of friendly arrangement. But for now you need security and stability. The child will need the same things, and I can provide that." Emily didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to argue, to say he had no obligation, that she could manage on her own. But another part, a more honest part, knew he was right. She had nowhere to go. She had no resources. And with a child on the way, her options were drastically limited. "Thank you," she finally said, feeling the words were inadequate to express what she truly felt. Nathan nodded, standing up. "But I need one thing from you," he added, stopping at the door. "I need absolute honesty from now on. No secrets, no lies, even if they're well-intentioned lies. If we're going to make this work, I need to be able to trust you." "You can," promised Emily. "I swear you can." He studied her for a moment, as if measuring the sincerity of her words. Then he nodded again and went into the house. Emily remained on the porch a while longer, processing the conversation. It wasn't a fairy tale happy ending. It wasn't love or romance or anything remotely close to that. But it was a chance, an opportunity to rebuild something from the ashes of all the lies and pain. And for now, that would have to be enough. The following weeks established a new normal on the farm. Emily continued with the house chores, but Nathan had drastically reduced what she could do, insisting she not carry anything heavy or stand for too long. It was strange, this pragmatic care. There was no affection in it, but there was something that could become respect. William became an unexpectedly strong ally. He spent hours with Emily, talking about the farm, about the Miller family, about Nathan. It was through these conversations that she began to better understand the man she was married to. Nathan had been married before, William revealed one afternoon as they folded clean laundry. 7 years ago, the old man said, his voice heavy with sadness. A girl from the neighboring town, Jessica. They married young, in love. But she left him, ran off with a traveling merchant who passed through the region regularly. Nathan woke up one morning, and she was gone, taking with her all the savings they had put aside together. Emily stopped folding, looking at William in shock. "He never mentioned—" "He doesn't talk about it," William sighed. "But that changed him, made him distrustful, closed off. That's why he accepted the arrangement with your family so easily. A marriage without emotion, without risk of pain, just practicality." "And now we find out even that was full of lies," murmured Emily. "Yes," William agreed. "But perhaps in the end, that's a good thing. Maybe it will teach them both that sometimes the most complicated things are the ones most worth it." Emily wasn't sure about that, but she filed the information away. It explained a lot about Nathan, about his distance, about his reluctance to show any real emotion. It was also during those weeks that Rebecca became a growing problem. She kept showing up more and more frequently, always with some excuse. And always, with subtle comments aimed at Emily. "I see you're putting on weight," she remarked one afternoon with a fake smile. "Must be the good home cooking." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. "Must be," Emily replied, keeping her voice neutral. "Or perhaps something else," Rebecca continued, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "You've had that special glow about you. You know what I'm talking about. The glow that pregnant women have." Emily froze. So Rebecca knew. Somehow she had found out or confirmed her suspicions. "I don't know what you're talking about," said Emily, but her voice came out too weak to be convincing. "Don't you?" Rebecca took a step closer. "What a shame. Because I know. And I wonder if Nathan knows too. That would be quite the news, wouldn't it? The man who accepted a sterile wife finding out she's going to have a baby. I can imagine the questions he would have." "Rebecca," Nathan's voice cut through the air like a blade. He had appeared on the porch coming from inside the house and was looking at the neighbor with an expression Emily had never seen before. "I think you have better things to do than bother my wife." "Nathan!" Rebecca immediately changed, her tone becoming sugary. "I was just visiting, keeping Emily company. She seems so lonely sometimes." "She's not lonely," he replied coldly. "She has my family. She doesn't need your constant visits. I'm just being a good neighbor." "You're being intrusive," Nathan cut in, "and you're making comments that aren't appropriate. So I'm going to ask you politely once. Stop coming here uninvited. Stop making insinuations, and stop creating problems where there aren't any." Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face turned red, part shame and part anger. "I see," she said finally, stiffly. "I didn't know my friendship was no longer welcome." "Friendship involves respect," Nathan replied. "Something you clearly don't have for Emily or for me." Rebecca looked from Nathan to Emily, her gaze full of pure poison. Then, without another word, she turned and left, her heavy footsteps echoing on the porch. When she was gone, Nathan turned to Emily. "Has she been bothering you for a long time?" he asked. "Since I arrived," Emily admitted. "But I thought it was just jealousy, perhaps. Or territorial protection." "It's more than that," Nathan sighed, leaning on the edge of the porch. "Rebecca always thought we would end up together. We grew up close, our families were friends, but I never saw her that way. And when I married Jessica, Rebecca became resentful. After Jessica left me, Rebecca thought she would have another chance, but I wasn't interested. And now she sees you've married again," Emily finished, "to a stranger. That must have been hard for her." "It's no excuse for her behavior," said Nathan. "You don't deserve to be treated like that." "No one does." Emily felt something warm spread through her chest. It wasn't love, not yet, maybe never would be, but it was the start of something. Respect, perhaps. Partnership. "Thank you," she said, "for defending me." Nathan nodded, seeming uncomfortable with the gratitude. "It's what a husband should do," he said simply, before returning to his work. Emily stayed on the porch, one hand unconsciously going to her belly, where life was growing, a life she hadn't planned, conceived under horrible circumstances, but one she was somehow beginning to feel as hers. Hers, and perhaps eventually Nathan's too. Time kept passing. Emily's belly grew, becoming impossible to hide. She stopped wearing her tighter dresses, adopting looser clothes that William had found in old trunks, belonging to some distant aunt who had been pregnant decades ago. It was during the 4th month that Nathan finally addressed the matter directly. They were having dinner, the three of them, when he set his utensils aside and looked at Emily with determination. "We need to decide," he said, "how we're going to handle this publicly." "With the baby?" asked Emily, though she knew that's what he meant. "Yes. When people ask, and they will ask, what will we say?" William stopped eating too, watching the exchange with interest. "We could tell the truth," suggested Emily, though her voice lacked conviction. The truth. Nathan gave a bitter laugh. What truth? That you were deceived about being sterile. That you were probably... He stopped, unable to say the words. That something horrible happened to you. That your parents lied to both of us. Do you think people will believe it? Or will they just judge us, make up stories, turn our lives into a spectacle? Emily knew he was right. In small communities, stories spread. They became twisted. The truth, no matter how true, would sound like an elaborate lie. So what do you suggest? She asked. Nathan was silent for a moment, thinking. Suggest that the doctors were wrong, he said finally. That you weren't sterile, just had difficulty getting pregnant. That we found out after the marriage and were surprised but happy. Lie, you mean, pointed out Emily. Omit, corrected Nathan. Let people assume what they want. It's none of their business anyway. And about the father? Emily barely managed to ask. How will we handle that? The question hung in the air between them. William cleared his throat, gaining both their attention. May I suggest something? Said the old man. Legally, Nathan is the father. You are married. The child will be born within the marriage. In the eyes of the law and society, it's his child. Why complicate it more than it already is? Because it's a lie, Nathan replied bitterly. The child isn't mine. The child isn't at fault for how it was conceived, William retorted firmly. And it needs a father. You can be that father, Nathan. You can raise this child as your own, give it a name, a family, a future. Or you can reject an innocent child because of pride. The words were harsh, but not without love. Nathan looked at his father, then at Emily, then at the table in front of him. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with contained emotion. It's not about pride, he said. It's about... Every time I look at that child, I'll remember. I'll remember everything that happened, all the lies, all the pain. How can I be a good father when all I'll see is a constant reminder of something terrible? Emily felt tears burning her eyes, but she held them back. She had no right to cry, not when Nathan was being so brutally honest. You're right, she said, her voice trembling. You shouldn't have to carry this. I'll leave. I'll find a way to... No, Nathan interrupted her. You're not leaving. I didn't say that. But you just said you can't. I said I don't know how I'll be able to, he corrected. But that doesn't mean I won't try. I just need time. I need to process all this. But the child will have my name. We'll have a roof over their head. We'll have food and care. And maybe with time I can see beyond the circumstances. It wasn't a declaration of paternal love. It wasn't even a promise of affection. But it was more than Emily could have hoped for, and she accepted it with silent gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know how much this means. Nathan nodded, returning to his meal in silence. The conversation was over, but something important had been established. A path, though winding and uncertain, but a path nonetheless. The following months were a period of strange adjustment. Emily's belly was visibly growing now, and people in the nearby town began to notice when she went shopping with William. There were whispers, curious looks, veiled questions. William handled everything with grace, confirming that yes, his daughter-in-law was expecting, and the whole family was very happy. Emily learned to smile and nod, to keep her hands protectively over her womb, to look the picture of a content pregnant wife. But at home the dynamic was more complicated. Nathan kept his emotional distance, though he was attentive in practical ways. He brought books about pregnancy and childbirth from the city. He hired a reputable midwife, Mrs. Martha, to check on Emily monthly. He even modified Emily's room, installing a larger window for more light and ventilation, saying it would be better for when the baby arrived. They were small gestures, but meaningful. Emily was beginning to realize that Nathan, despite his words about not knowing how to handle the situation, was doing exactly that, handling it. In his own way, with his characteristic reserve, but handling it. One night, in the 6th month of pregnancy, Emily woke with sharp pains in her abdomen. They weren't contractions, it was too early for that, but they were painful enough to make her moan loudly. She tried to get up, but another wave of pain hit her. stronger than the last. The bedroom door opened almost immediately. Nathan was there wearing only trousers, clearly just awakened. "What happened?" he asked, clear concern in his voice. "Pain," Emily managed to say between short breaths. "In my abdomen, I don't know what—" "I'll get my father." Nathan turned to leave, but she stopped him. "No, wait. Maybe it's just... maybe it will pass." But it didn't pass. Another wave hit her, making her double over, hands clenched over her womb. Nathan hesitated no longer. He ran out, and Emily heard urgent voices in the hallway. William appeared moments later, his experienced eyes quickly assessing the situation. "It might be false labor," he said, "but we need to be sure. Nathan, go get Mrs. Martha. Now." Nathan didn't question it. Emily heard his heavy footsteps going down the stairs, the front door slamming, the gallop of a horse departing. William helped Emily lie down better, placing pillows under her back, bringing water. He said nothing comforting or empty. He just stayed there, a calm presence amid the pain and fear. Mrs. Martha arrived an hour later, brought by a visibly agitated Nathan. The midwife was a robust woman in her 60s, with experienced hands and a sharp gaze. She examined Emily carefully, asking questions about the pain, when it started, how it felt. Finally, she stepped back, wiping her hands. "It's not labor," she announced. "But you're under a lot of stress. The baby is fine for now, but if you don't rest more, we could have problems. Complete bed rest for the next few days. No work, no worries, just rest." "But the household chores," Emily began. "I'll take care of that," interrupted William. "You will rest, and I can hire someone from the village to help," added Nathan. "Temporarily until you recover." Emily wanted to protest, but the pain still throbbed in her abdomen, a reminder that her body was telling her she needed to slow down. She nodded, defeated. Mrs. Martha left after leaving some herbs for tea that would help with the pain. William withdrew as well, leaving only Nathan and Emily in the room. For a long moment, Nathan stood there, looking at her in bed, an unreadable expression on his face. Then, to Emily's surprise, he pulled the chair closer and sat down. "You scared me," he said finally. "I'm sorry," Emily tried to smile. "It wasn't intentional." "I know." Silence fell between them. Emily could feel that Nathan wanted to say something more, but he was struggling to find the words. "When I was riding to get Mrs. Martha," he said finally, his voice low, "all I could think was that something could happen to you, to the baby, and I realized that, no matter the circumstances, no matter how we got here, I don't want anything bad to happen to you." He looked at her directly now, his eyes dark but sincere. "I don't know if I'll ever look at this child and feel what a father should feel. I don't know if I can forget everything that happened, but I don't want anything bad to happen. That has to mean something, doesn't it?" Emily felt tears burn her eyes. It was the closest to a declaration of care that Nathan had made since the pregnancy was revealed. "It means a lot," she said, her voice breaking. "It means more than you know." Nathan nodded, seeming relieved, but also exhausted. He stood up, walking to the door, but paused before leaving. "Rest," he said. "Really? Without worrying about chores or what anyone thinks. Just rest." And with that he left, leaving Emily alone with her confused thoughts and feelings, but also with a small glimmer of hope. The days of forced rest were frustrating for Emily, who was used to always being busy, but they were also revealing. Without the constant chores to distract her, she had time to really think about her situation, about the baby, about Nathan, about everything. Nathan hired a girl from the village, Amy, to help with the heavy household tasks. Amy was 18 years old, shy but hard-working, and she accepted William's instructions diligently. Emily felt strange at first, having someone do the work she considered hers, but she gradually began to accept it. It was during this period that she and Nathan began to have real conversations. He would sit in her room after dinner, ostensibly to make sure she was okay, but they ended up talking about everything. The farm, future plans, childhood memories, nothing too personal, but more than the silences that had characterized the first months of marriage. One night, About a week after the scare, Nathan brought with him a small wooden cradle. "My father made it," he explained, placing it in the corner of the room. "For me, when I was born. He kept it all these years. Said you should have it." Emily looked at the cradle, the hands worked to perfection, the care evident in every detail. It was an offer of peace, a bridge over the chasm that separated them. "It's beautiful," she said, feeling emotion tighten her throat. Nathan ran his hand over the wood, checking if it was stable. "When my mother was pregnant with me," he said without looking at Emily, "my father was terrified. He didn't know how to be a father. He was afraid of failing, of not being what the child needed. He told me this years later, but when I was born, he said something changed. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't a bolt of divine love like in stories, but it was gradual. One day he looked at me and realized that scared baby was his responsibility, his son." He finally looked at Emily. "I'm telling you this because maybe it's the same for me too. Maybe it takes time. Maybe it's not immediate, but I'm willing to try. To be what this child needs, even if it takes time to get there." Emily couldn't speak. The tears just fell, silent and sincere. Nathan seemed uncomfortable with the emotion, as always, but didn't run away. He stayed, letting her cry, his presence being enough. When she finally recovered, wiping her face with her sleeve, he was already at the door. "Good night, Emily," he said softly. "Good night, Nathan, and thank you." He nodded and disappeared down the hall. The 7th month arrived with more stability. The pain didn't return, and Mrs. Martha declared that Emily could resume some light activities as long as she didn't overdo it. Amy continued helping, making the workload much more manageable. It was that month that Emily began to feel the baby moving more noticeably. They weren't just the slight tremors she had felt before, but real kicks, movements that made her belly visibly distort. She was in the kitchen one afternoon making bread when a particularly strong kick made her stop and put her hand on her belly, laughing in surprise. "What is it?" William, who was reading at the table, looked up. "The baby," Emily smiled. "Just kicked hard. It's getting more active." "That's good," William smiled back. "It means it's strong, healthy." Nathan entered at that moment, coming from the fields. He saw the two smiling and stopped. "Did I miss something?" he asked suspiciously. "The baby's kicking," explained William. "Emily was just mentioning it." Nathan nodded, going to the sink to wash his hands. Emily didn't expect him to show any interest, so she was surprised when, after drying off, he hesitantly approached. Is it strong?" he asked, seeming uncomfortable with his own curiosity. "Very," Emily replied. "Sometimes it feels like it's trying to get out early." A small smile appeared at the corner of Nathan's lips, so brief she almost thought she imagined it. "Stubborn child, then," he commented. "It's going to be a handful," agreed Emily, and for a moment, just a small moment, it was as if they were a normal couple, talking about the child they were expecting. The moment passed, but it left something behind, a trace of normality, of possibility. The 8th month was when things got complicated again, but in a different way. Richard showed up at the farm without warning. Emily was sitting on the porch peeling potatoes with Amy when she saw the familiar figure getting off the rented wagon. Her heart froze. She hadn't seen or spoken to her father since that awful day in Lancaster. She didn't want to see him now. Amy noticed her reaction. "Mrs. Emily? Are you okay? Who is that man?" "My father," Emily managed to say, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "Amy, please go get Nathan, quickly." The girl didn't question it. She left the potatoes and ran toward the fields where Nathan was working. Richard climbed the porch steps slowly, like someone approaching a frightened animal. He seemed to have aged years in months. His face was thinner, with deep lines that weren't there before. "Emily," he said, stopping a few feet away. "Daughter." "What do you want?" asked Emily, surprised by the coldness in her own voice. I needed to see you, know how you are." "Now you care?" "Months later?" Richard winced as if he'd been slapped. "I always cared," he said. But the words sounded hollow. I just didn't know how to fix what we did, what your mother did. What you both did, corrected Emily. You knew about the lies. Maybe you didn't create them, but you allowed them. You stayed silent while your wife destroyed any chance I had at a normal life. I know, Richard hung his head, and I hate myself for it every day. But Emily, you have to understand we were desperate. No money, no options. Your mother thought she was helping you. Helping me? Emily stood up, her anger finally overflowing. She made me believe I was defective, useless. And all the while, she allowed something horrible to happen under her own roof. You both allowed it. We didn't know about Robert. Richard raised his hands defensively. If we had known, we never would have. But you didn't know because you weren't paying attention. Emily was crying now, years of pain and anger finally exploding. You were so busy trying to get rid of me that you didn't see the danger right under your own nose. What's going on here? Nathan's voice cut through the air. He was coming from the fields in quick strides, Amy running behind him trying to keep up. William was also arriving from inside the house, alerted by the noise. Nathan, Richard turned to him, please, I just wanted to see my daughter. You were instructed never to come here again, said Nathan, positioning himself between Richard and Emily. Clearly. I know, but she's pregnant. I'm going to be a grandfather. Don't I have the right to— Right? Nathan exploded. You think you have rights? After everything you did? After all the lies? Please, Richard was almost begging now. I know we were wrong. I know there are no excuses, but she's my daughter, and that's my grandchild. I can't just never see them. Emily watched her father, this man she had once tried to love, tried to respect, and felt nothing but emptiness. There was no anger anymore, not in that moment, just sadness for everything that could have been and never would be. You should leave, she said, her voice calm but firm. You and my mother made choices that hurt me deeply, and now I'm making my choice, and my choice is that you will no longer be part of my life, or my child's life. Emily, please. Richard took a step forward, but Nathan blocked him. She said to leave, said Nathan, his voice low but dangerous, and I suggest you obey. Now. For a moment it seemed Richard would argue, but then he saw the determination on Emily's face, the fierce protection on Nathan's, and realized he had lost. Lost his daughter, lost any chance at redemption. I'm sorry, he said once more, but the words were lost to the wind as he turned and walked back to the wagon. They watched him leave in silence. When he finally disappeared around the bend in the road, Emily felt her legs weaken. Nathan caught her before she could fall, guiding her back to the chair. Are you all right? He asked, clear concern in his voice. I am. Emily took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. I'm better than I thought I would be. William placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You were brave, he said, and you did the right thing. Some relationships are too toxic to save. Emily nodded, knowing he was right. But still, there was a sadness in cutting blood ties, even when it was necessary. Nathan remained by her side for a long time after William and Amy returned to their tasks. He said nothing, just stood there, a solid and comforting presence. Thank you, Emily said finally, for defending me, for supporting me. That's what we do, Nathan replied simply. That's what family does. The word family echoed between them. It was no longer just an arrangement of convenience. It was becoming something real, something with meaning. The 9th month arrived with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Emily was huge now. Every movement was uncomfortable, and sleeping was nearly impossible. Martha came weekly, checking that everything was progressing normally. Any day now, she said after a particularly thorough examination. The baby is in the right position. Your body is getting ready. Stay close to home and send for me at the first sign of labor. Emily nodded, feeling nervousness growing in her stomach. Soon she would meet this child who had grown inside her, this impossible life that had changed everything. Nathan became even more attentive in the last few weeks. He wouldn't let Emily do anything that could be considered strenuous. He even started sleeping on the living room sofa, closer to Emily's room, just to be safe, as he explained. It was on a night with a full moon that everything began. Emily woke with a strange feeling, a pressure different from anything she had felt before. And then came the first contraction, a wave of pain that made her arch her back. She tried to breathe through it, as Martha had instructed. When it passed, she got up carefully and went to the door. "Nathan?" she called, her voice trembling. She heard immediate movement in the living room. Seconds later, Nathan was there, clearly still half asleep but instantly alert. "Is it time?" he asked. Emily could barely nod before another contraction hit, stronger than the first. She grabbed the doorframe for support, groaning in pain. Nathan wasted no time. He woke William, sent Amy running to fetch Martha, and then returned to Emily, helping her lie back down. "Everything will be all right," he said, and Emily wasn't sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. "Martha will be here soon. You're strong, you can do this." The next few hours were a blur of pain. The contractions came closer and closer, more and more intense. Martha arrived and took charge, giving calm but firm instructions, preparing everything that would be needed. William kept a respectful distance but was always nearby, bringing hot water, clean towels, anything that was asked for. Nathan, to Emily's surprise, stayed. Martha had suggested he wait in another room, as was customary, but Emily had grabbed his hand during a particularly brutal contraction and didn't let go. And he stayed, holding her hand, wiping her face with a damp cloth, murmuring words of encouragement that she could barely hear over the pain. Finally, when the first light of dawn began to appear through the window, Martha announced, "It's time to push. With the next contraction, I want you to push with all your might." Emily did, screaming with the effort. Once, twice, 3 times. And then, miraculously, a baby's cry filled the room. "It's a boy," announced Martha, lifting the tiny baby covered in vernix and blood. "A healthy, strong boy." She quickly cleaned the baby, cut the cord, and wrapped him in a clean blanket before placing him in Emily's arms. Emily looked at the small red face, the eyes closed, the mouth open in another indignant cry. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. And she felt a love so intense and immediate, it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears flowing freely. "Hello." She looked up and saw Nathan staring at the baby. His face was pale, his jaw tight, his eyes shining with emotion he was clearly trying to control. "Do you want to hold him?" offered Emily, her voice gentle. For a moment, Nathan seemed like he would refuse, but then, slowly, he extended his arms. Emily carefully placed the baby in his arms, adjusting the blanket. Nathan looked at the boy, and something in his face changed. It broke, softened. He lightly touched the baby's cheek with a finger, and the little one instinctively turned his head toward the touch. "He's so small," murmured Nathan, clear wonder in his voice. "And perfect," added Emily. William approached, looking over his son's shoulder to see his grandson. "Welcome to the family," said the old man, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Welcome." Martha finished tending to Emily, making sure everything was all right, before starting to pack her instruments. "Mother and baby are healthy," she announced. "But Emily needs rest. A lot of rest. And someone will need to help with the baby in the first few weeks." "I'll take care of that," said William immediately. "We can keep Amy longer if necessary." "And I'll help," added Nathan, still holding the baby as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "I'll help with whatever is needed." Emily watched him, this man who had entered her life through such complicated circumstances, who had been cold and distant, who had said he didn't know if he could love this baby. And she saw in his face at that moment something that looked very much like budding love. Maybe it wasn't love yet, not completely, but it was a start, and sometimes beginnings were all that was needed. Martha left at noon, leaving detailed instructions and promising to return the next day to check on them. William and Amy prepared a light lunch, though Emily was too tired to eat much. The baby slept in the crib next to Emily's bed, comfortably wrapped, his little fists closed near his face. Nathan had only gone out to handle the most urgent tasks on the farm, but returned quickly, as if he didn't want to be away for long. That night, as Emily breastfed the baby for the first time, as Martha had instructed her, Nathan entered the room hesitantly. "May I come in?" he asked, even though technically it was his house. "Of course," Emily smiled, tired but happy. He sat in the chair beside the bed, watching mother and child with that thoughtful expression she was beginning to recognize. "Have we thought of a name?" he finally asked. "I was thinking—" Emily paused, weighing her words carefully. "I thought of Ethan. It's a strong name, but also gentle. It means strong, enduring. But if you have another suggestion—" Nathan was silent for a moment, testing the name in his mind. "Ethan," he repeated, and a small smile touched his lips. "Ethan Miller. It sounds good. It sounds right." "Are you sure?" asked Emily. "You don't have to decide now if—" "I'm sure," interrupted Nathan, his eyes still on the baby. "Ethan is perfect." And so it was decided. Ethan Miller, born on a full moon morning, the son of impossible circumstances, but loved nonetheless. The first weeks with Ethan were challenging in ways Emily hadn't anticipated. The baby woke every few hours to nurse, crying with impressive strength for something so small. Emily was exhausted, her eyes perpetually dark-circled, her body still recovering from childbirth. But she wasn't alone. William proved surprisingly competent with babies, rocking Ethan when he was restless, changing diapers without complaint, humming old songs that soothed the little one. Amy also helped whenever she could, washing the countless clothes a baby dirties and preparing nutritious meals for Emily. And Nathan. Nathan was a revelation. He woke when Ethan cried at night, even when Emily insisted she could handle it alone. He would bring the baby to her, wait while she nursed, then take Ethan back and rock him until he fell asleep again. During the day when he wasn't working, he held Ethan, walking through the house with soft, rhythmic steps, murmuring one-sided conversations that made Emily smile. One afternoon, about a month after the birth, Emily woke from a nap and didn't find Ethan in the crib beside her bed. Panic hit her for a moment before she heard voices coming from the porch. She got up carefully, still a bit sore, and went to the door. What she saw made her stop. Nathan was sitting in the rocking chair, Ethan nestled comfortably in his arms, and he was talking to the baby, his voice low but clear in the quiet afternoon. "You see those fields over there?" he was saying, pointing to the golden fields in the distance. "One day they'll be yours. I'll teach you all about planting, about harvesting, about taking care of the land. My father taught me, and I'll teach you. It's hard work, but honest. Makes you a good man." He paused, adjusting the blanket around Ethan. "And I'll teach you other things too. How to treat people with respect, how to be strong but gentle, how to protect those you love." His voice grew softer. "How to be better than I was. How not to let fear keep you from loving." Emily felt tears burn her eyes. Nathan finally looked down, meeting Ethan's attentive eyes fixed on him. "You didn't ask to be here," Nathan continued, his voice now almost a whisper. "Didn't ask for the circumstances that brought you into the world. But you're here anyway. And I'll tell you something, little Ethan, it doesn't matter how you started. What matters is who you become. And I'll do everything in my power to make sure you become a good man." He kissed Ethan's forehead gently, a gesture so tender it broke Emily's heart in a good way. "You are my son," Nathan said firmly. "Maybe not by blood, but by choice. And choice is stronger than blood anyway, remember that." Emily stepped back silently, returning to the room before Nathan could see her. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands over her face, crying tears of relief and joy. Nathan had chosen to love Ethan, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. That night, after Ethan was asleep and William had retired, Emily found Nathan in the kitchen making tea. "I heard," she said without preamble, "this afternoon, what you said to Ethan on the porch." Nathan froze, his back stiff. When he turned, his face was flushed with shame. "You shouldn't have heard that. It was a private conversation between me and your son," Emily finished firmly. "Because that's what he is, isn't he? Your son." Nathan didn't answer immediately. He poured the tea into 2 cups, pushed one toward Emily, and sat facing her. "I don't know when it happened," he admitted finally. "There wasn't a specific moment. But every time I hold him, every time he looks at me with those eyes, I don't see the circumstances anymore. I don't see the past anymore. I just see him. Ethan. And I feel—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I feel what I imagine a father should feel." "Love," said Emily gently. "Love," Nathan agreed, the word coming out like a confession. "And it's scary. Because I didn't plan to feel this. I didn't want to feel this. But it's there anyway, growing every day." Emily reached across the table, placing her hand over Nathan's. He looked at their joined hands with surprise. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing to love him, for being the father he needs, for being more than anyone could expect." Nathan turned his hand, intertwining his fingers with Emily's. It was the first time they had touched like that, intentionally and intimately. "You deserve thanks too," he said, "for being strong, for surviving everything you've been through, for being a wonderful mother to Ethan, even when you had every reason not to want that." They stayed like that for a long moment, hands intertwined, looking at each other over cooling cups of tea. Something had changed between them. A barrier had fallen. "Can we try?" Nathan asked finally. "Try to be a real family, not just out of convenience or responsibility, but because we want to." Emily felt her heart speed up. She had given up hope that this could happen, that Nathan could see her as more than an obligation. "I would like that very much," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But we don't have to rush. We can take it slow, figure it out together." "I've already decided," Nathan interrupted. "I decided when I first saw you being handed over like a package. I decided when I saw you crying. I decided when I defended you from your parents. I decided every time I held Ethan and realized that despite everything, we had built something worth protecting." He squeezed her hand. "It's not a storybook romance. It's not perfect, but it's real. And it's ours. If you want it." "I want it," said Emily without hesitation. "I want it very much." And for the first time since they had met, Nathan smiled. A real, full smile that lit up his whole face and made his eyes shine. The following months were full of discoveries. Emily and Nathan learned about each other in ways their forced marriage had never allowed. They discovered that Nathan liked to read at night, poetry especially, something he had never shared with anyone. Emily revealed that she knew how to play guitar, a skill her parents had disapproved of as impractical, but which she had practiced in secret as a teenager. They started spending afternoons together, after Ethan fell asleep, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan told her about Jessica, about how her betrayal had closed him off emotionally for years. Emily shared her own wounds, the years of feeling inferior, of believing the lies her family had built. "You were never inferior," Nathan said one night as they sat on the porch under a starry sky. "You were always strong. You just weren't allowed to see it." "I feel strong now," Emily admitted. "For the first time in my life, I feel whole." Ethan was growing quickly, becoming more alert every day. At 2 months, he started to smile, a toothless grin that melted everyone who saw it. At 3 months, he laughed, a gurgling sound that filled the house with joy. William was completely smitten with his grandson, spending hours telling stories to the baby, who clearly didn't understand the words, but seemed to love the attention. It was during Ethan's 4th month that Rebecca reappeared. Emily was in the vegetable garden with the baby in a sling tied to her chest when she saw the familiar figure approaching. Her stomach tightened, but she remained calm. "Rebecca," she greeted, without warmth, but without hostility. "Emily!" Rebecca stopped at a respectful distance, her eyes immediately going to the baby. "I heard you had the baby." "I did. This is Ethan." Rebecca watched the child for a long moment. Emily couldn't read the expression on her face. "He's beautiful," Rebecca said finally, and to Emily's surprise, she seemed sincere. "Thank you." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Rebecca shifted her feet, clearly struggling with something. "I came to apologize," she said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "For the way I acted, for the things I said, for how I treated you since you arrived." Emily hadn't expected this. She stayed silent, waiting for Rebecca to continue. "I was jealous," Rebecca admitted, her face flushing. "Nathan and I grew up together, and I always thought we would end up married. When he married Jessica, it hurt. When she left him, I thought it was my chance. But he wasn't interested. And then you showed up, a stranger, and somehow got what I never could." "I didn't get anything," said Emily gently. "Not at first, at least. It was complicated and painful for both of us. But it worked," pointed out Rebecca. "I can see it in the way he looks at you now, in the way he cares for you and the baby. He loves you, Emily." And that was hard to accept. Emily didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to reject the apology, remind Rebecca of all the cruel things she had said. But another part, a more mature part, understood. Envy was a powerful and destructive emotion. "I accept your apology," said Emily finally. "But you need to understand that trust needs to be rebuilt. I can't simply forget what happened." "I understand," Rebecca nodded quickly. "And I don't expect you to forget. Just, I hope we can eventually be, if not friends, at least cordial neighbors." "We can try," agreed Emily. Rebecca smiled, a small but genuine smile this time. "Thank you. And congratulations on the baby. Honestly, he's beautiful." She turned to leave, but Emily called her. "Rebecca?" When the other woman turned, Emily continued. "There will be someone for you too, someone who sees you as a first choice, not as a second option. Don't give up." Rebecca's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered, and then was gone. Nathan was surprised when Emily told him about the visit that evening. "She actually apologized?" he asked with skepticism. "Yes, and it seemed sincere." Nathan didn't seem fully convinced, but didn't press. "If you think we can trust her eventually, I'll respect your judgment. But I'll keep an eye out." He was protective without being controlling, a line that Nathan had learned to walk well. When Ethan turned 6 months old, the whole family dynamic had completely changed. William had suggested that it was time for Nathan and Emily to share the main bedroom, since they were, after all, married and clearly committed to each other now. "I can take the small room," said the old man. "You need more space with the baby anyway." The transition was awkward at first. Emily had grown used to her small room, her privacy. But sharing space with Nathan proved natural in ways she hadn't expected. He was respectful, careful, always making sure she was comfortable. It took a few weeks until their relationship became physical, beyond simply sleeping in the same room. It was gradual, natural, a kiss here, a hug there. And then, one night, when Ethan was fast asleep and the house was quiet, they finally became husband and wife in the fullest sense. It was different than Emily had imagined it would be. There was no pain, no fear, just connection, kindness, and a growing affection that was turning into something deeper. Afterward, lying together in the dark, Nathan pulled Emily close. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I've loved you for a while, but I was afraid to say it." Emily felt tears of happiness burning her eyes. "I love you too," she replied. "I didn't expect it. I didn't plan it. But it's here anyway." "Like Ethan," observed Nathan with a smile in his voice. "The best things in life seem to come when we least expect them." Ethan kept growing, reaching milestones that filled the house with excitement. At 7 months, he started sitting up on his own. At 8, he was crawling, exploring every corner of the house he could reach. At 9 months, he said his first word, "Dada," looking right at Nathan. Nathan picked up the boy, spinning him in the air while Ethan laughed. "Did you hear that?" he said to Emily, his eyes shining. "He called me Dada." "I heard." Emily smiled, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Because that's what you are, his father." The challenges, of course, hadn't completely disappeared. There were tough days when Ethan didn't sleep, when the harvests weren't as good as expected, when bills needed to be paid. But they faced everything together now, as a team, as a real family. It was during Ethan's first birthday that Emily realized something important. They were preparing a small celebration, just family. Nathan, William, Amy, who had practically become part of the family, and even Rebecca, who had proven sincere in her change of behavior. Looking around, seeing everyone laughing, seeing Ethan in his high chair clapping with excitement, seeing Nathan beside her with an arm casually around her waist, Emily realized she was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. She had started this journey believing she was flawed, unwanted, worthless. She had been handed over as a burden, accepted only out of practicality, but through all the pain, all the lies, all the hardships, she had found something real. She had found love, family, purpose. "What are you thinking about?" whispered Nathan, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Just realizing how things have changed," replied Emily, resting her head on his shoulder. "How we've changed." "For the better?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "For much better." They sang happy birthday to Ethan, who was fascinated by the lit candle on the small cake Emily had made. When they helped him blow it out, he smacked his little hands in the frosting, spreading it everywhere, making everyone laugh. "To many more years," toasted William, raising his coffee cup. "To family, to love, to second chances." "To second chances," echoed Emily, looking at Nathan. "To first beginnings," Nathan gently corrected, "because that's what we really have. A beginning, no matter what came before." That night, after everyone had left and Ethan was sleeping, Emily and Nathan stayed on the porch as they had done so many times before. The sky was full of stars, the breeze was gentle, and the silence was comfortable. "Do you ever think about the future?" asked Emily. "About what comes next?" "All the time," admitted Nathan. "I think about Ethan growing up, about maybe having more children if you want, about growing old here on this farm surrounded by family." Emily smiled in the dark. "More children," she repeated. "I'd like that." Even after everything, Nathan sounded surprised. "After how Ethan came into the world." "Especially because of that," said Emily firmly. "Because Ethan showed me that I can, that I'm not broken like they made me believe. And because now having a child with you, chosen and planned and loved from the start, that would be magical." Nathan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "Then we'll do that," he promised. "When you're ready, when we're both ready. But this time it will be different. It will be perfect." The months turned into years. Ethan grew from a baby to a toddler, always running, always laughing, always curious about everything. He had light eyes that were neither Emily's nor Nathan's, but were his and his alone. He had wavy brown hair that never stayed combed, no matter how hard Emily tried. When Ethan was 2.5, Emily discovered she was pregnant again. This time there was no shock, no fear, only joy. She and Nathan told Ethan he was going to be a big brother, and though he didn't fully understand, he was excited about the idea. William was beaming at the news. "Another grandchild," he exclaimed. "My heart can barely handle so much joy." The second pregnancy was completely different from the first. Emily was healthy, well cared for, and completely at peace. Nathan was attentive from the very beginning, but this time without the emotional complications he had carried before. This baby was theirs in every sense. A girl was born on a spring afternoon, with a strong cry that announced her arrival to the world. They named her Olivia, in honor of Nathan's mother who had passed away when he was young. When Ethan met his little sister, he looked at her with fascination, gently touching her little head with careful fingers. "Baby," he said with reverence, "my baby." "Your sister," corrected Emily affectionately. "And you're going to take care of her, right?" Ethan nodded solemnly, taking his new role very seriously. William held Olivia with the practice of someone who had done it before, a permanent smile on his aged face. "Perfect," he murmured. "Absolutely perfect." Nathan watched everything with deep contentment. He had his wife, whom he loved more each day. He had his children, both healthy and happy. He had his father, still strong in his 70s. He had his farm, thriving under his care. He had everything that mattered. But he also had something more. He had overcome his past. He had learned to trust again, to love again, to leave behind the wounds that Jessica had left. Emily had healed something in him that he didn't even know was broken. When Olivia was 6 months old and Ethan was about to turn 4, Emily found an old box in the attic while looking for old baby clothes that Ethan had used. Inside there were yellowed photographs, old documents, and a letter. The letter was from Jessica to Nathan, never delivered, probably written shortly before she left. Emily knew she should put it back, that it wasn't her place to read it. But curiosity won. The letter was short, but revealing. Jessica explained that she had left not because she didn't love Nathan, but because she loved the merchant too much. She asked for forgiveness but offered no regret. It ended by saying she hoped Nathan would find happiness, even if it wasn't with her. Emily stared at the letter for a long time. Then, carefully, she folded it back into the envelope and went downstairs. Nathan was on the porch, Ethan sitting on his lap as he read a storybook aloud. Olivia slept in the portable crib beside them. It was such a perfectly domestic scene that Emily almost didn't want to interrupt. But she approached, the letter in her hand. "I found this in the attic," she said, offering the letter. "I think you should have it." Nathan looked at the envelope, recognized the handwriting immediately. His expression closed off for a moment, then relaxed. "Did you read it?" he asked without accusation. "I did," admitted Emily. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have, but—" "It's okay." Nathan took the letter but didn't open it. Instead, he stood up carefully so as not to wake Olivia, placed Ethan on the floor with the book, and walked to the edge of the porch. Emily followed him, worried that she had opened old wounds, but when Nathan turned to her, there was peace on his face. "I don't need to read this," he said. "Whatever it says, it doesn't matter anymore. That part of my life is over. This life, with you, with our children, is the only one that matters." He tore the letter, letting the pieces fall from the porch for the wind to take away. "No more secrets," he said. "No more past. Just future." Emily hugged him, feeling her love for this man overflow. "Just future," she agreed. The years continued to pass. Ethan started at the village school, a bright and curious boy who loved to learn. Olivia grew into a sweet and determined child who rarely cried but always knew exactly what she wanted. William aged gracefully, still active but slower, spending most of his days on the porch watching his grandchildren play. When Ethan was 8 years old, he asked a question during dinner that everyone had secretly feared. "Why are my eyes different from yours?" he asked, looking from Nathan to Emily to Olivia, who had dark eyes like her father. "Olivia has eyes like Papa. I have different eyes." Emily felt her heart tighten. She looked at Nathan, who kept a calm expression. "Come here," said Nathan, pushing his chair back. Ethan approached, and Nathan pulled him onto his lap, even though the boy was getting too big for that. "I'll tell you a story." And he told it. Not everything. Ethan was too young for some details. But he told enough. He told about the arranged marriage, about the lies that Emily's family had told, about how Ethan had arrived differently from Olivia. But he emphasized repeatedly that Ethan was loved from the moment he was born, that he was their son in every way that mattered. Ethan listened to everything attentively, his face serious. "So you're not my biological father?" he finally asked. "Not by blood," confirmed Nathan, "but by heart. And heart is more important than blood, Ethan. I chose to be your father. Every day I choose to be your father. And that choice is stronger than any blood bond could be." Ethan thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Okay," he said simply. "You're still my papa." "I always will be," promised Nathan, hugging the boy tightly. Emily watched with tears in her eyes. She had feared this moment, feared that the truth would destroy what they had built. But Ethan, with the simple wisdom of a child, had understood what really mattered. Later that night, after both children were asleep, Emily leaned against Nathan as they lay in bed. "He accepted it so easily," she murmured. "Because for him it's simple," replied Nathan. "He knows he's loved, that's all a child really needs to know." "You're a wonderful father," said Emily, "to both." "I learned from the best," Nathan kissed her forehead. And you're a wonderful mother. We've given our children what neither of us had, a home full of love and honesty." It was true. They had broken the cycle of lies and pain. They had created something new and beautiful from the ashes of terrible circumstances. William passed away peacefully in his sleep when Ethan was 12 and Olivia 8. It was a profound loss for the whole family, but also a natural passage. He had lived a long and full life, had seen his grandchildren grow up, had found peace in his final years. At the funeral, Nathan spoke about his father with a choked voice, remembering not just the man he had been, but the lessons he had taught. "My father taught me that family isn't just about blood," said Nathan, looking directly at Ethan as he spoke. "It's about choice. It's about being present. It's about love that persists through difficulties. He showed me that when he accepted Emily into our family, when he embraced Ethan without question, when he taught us all that love has no limits or conditions." Ethan, who was becoming a tall and serious young man, cried openly. Olivia clung to her mother, burying her face in Emily's dress. They buried William on the hill he loved, overlooking the farm he had built with his own hands. It was a farewell worthy of a man who had lived with dignity. In the following years, the farm passed completely into Nathan's control. Ethan, now a teenager, showed genuine interest in learning the business, working alongside his father during school breaks and on weekends. Olivia, on the other hand, had discovered a passion for art, spending hours drawing and painting everything she saw. Emily supported them both, encouraging Ethan in his agricultural studies and helping Olivia develop her artistic talent. She herself had begun teaching music to children in the village, using her secret guitar that Nathan had found and restored for her as a birthday gift years earlier. When Ethan turned 15, he came to speak with Nathan one evening. "Dad," he said, using the term with natural ease, "I want to know more about the man who fathered me. Not to find him or meet him, just to know, to understand." Nathan looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. "All right," said Nathan. "What do you want to know?" "Was he a bad person?" asked Ethan. "What he did, Bas, was something terrible. But who was he?" It was a complex question. Emily took a deep breath. "I don't know who he really was," she admitted. "He was my mother's brother, but I barely knew him. What he did was horrible, yes, unforgivable. But it doesn't define you, Ethan. You are not responsible for his actions." "I know," said Ethan, "and I know that you and Dad are my real parents, but I wanted to understand where I came from. The whole truth." They talked for hours that night, answering questions Ethan had held on to for years, giving him the honesty he deserved now that he was old enough to process the full truth. In the end, Ethan hugged them both. "Thank you," he said, "for being honest, for loving me, for never making me feel different." "You are not different," said Nathan firmly. "You are our son, always have been, always will be." Ethan smiled, that bright smile that lit up any room. "I know, and I'm lucky for that." The teenage years brought their own challenges. Ethan, always serious and responsible, sometimes carried too much weight on his shoulders. Olivia, on the other hand, was dramatic and emotional, turning small problems into major crises. But Emily and Nathan navigated it all together, presenting a united front, loving their children through every phase. When Ethan was 18 and preparing to take on more responsibilities on the farm, he started dating a girl from the neighboring village, Madison. She was sweet and hard-working, the daughter of another farmer, and clearly loved Ethan deeply. Emily saw in Madison something of her younger self, a girl trying to find her place in the world. She took Madison under her wing, teaching her, guiding her, giving her the kind of maternal support she herself had never received from Margaret. Margaret and Richard had tried to make contact a few times over the years, sending letters that Emily never answered. When William died, they appeared at the funeral, but kept a respectful distance. Emily saw them from afar, noticing how they had aged, how they seemed smaller somehow. But she felt nothing for them, not anger, not longing, just indifference. They tried to approach her after the ceremony, but Ethan, sensing his mother's discomfort, politely but firmly intercepted them. "My mother does not wish to speak with you," he said with the courtesy Emily and Nathan had instilled in him, but also with firmness. "Please respect that." Richard tried to protest, but Margaret pulled him back. They left without another word, and Emily never saw them again. At 16, Olivia announced she wanted to study art at a larger school in the city. It was the first time one of the children had spoken of leaving the farm, and Emily felt the familiar tightness of fear. But she didn't let it show. "If that's what you want," she said, hugging her daughter, "we'll make it happen." Nathan, ever practical, did the calculations, checked the options, and found a good school Olivia could attend while staying with a family of a distant cousin of Nathan's. "You'll miss her," observed Emily, watching Nathan make all the arrangements. "Immensely," he admitted. "But I won't stop our children from pursuing their dreams. We built this family on honesty and love, and that includes letting them fly when they're ready." And so Olivia left, tears in her eyes but excitement on her face. The house felt quieter without her, but also proud. She was becoming the person she was meant to be. Ethan and Madison married when he was 21. It was a beautiful ceremony in the same chapel where Emily and Nathan had married years before, but this time filled with genuine love and celebration. There were no forced arrangements, no lies, just two young people in love choosing to build a life together. Emily watched from the pew, Nathan by her side, and couldn't help but compare it to her own wedding. How different it seemed now, with years of love and growth between them. "What are you thinking about?" whispered Nathan, noticing her distant gaze. "How much has changed?" she whispered back. "How much we've changed." "For the better," he said, taking her hand. "Always for the better." Ethan and Madison built a small house on the property, close enough to help with the farm, but far enough for privacy. Within a year, they announced they were expecting a baby. Emily was going to be a grandmother. The concept was strange but wonderful. She, who had been told she could never have children, now not only had two but was about to have a grandchild. The baby, a boy they named William in honor of his great-grandfather, was born healthy and strong. When Emily held him for the first time, she saw the continuation of her family, the living proof that cycles can be broken, that stories can have happy endings even when they start in tragedy. Olivia came home to meet her nephew, now a 20-year-old young woman with an impressive portfolio, and dreams of having her own gallery one day. "He's perfect," she said, holding little William carefully. Absolutely perfect. The family was together, Emily and Nathan now in their 50s, Ethan and Madison with the baby, Olivia visiting between her studies. It was everything Emily could have dreamed of and more. One evening, after everyone had retired, Emily and Nathan sat on the porch as they always did. It was their ritual, their moment of quiet at the end of each day. "Do you regret it?" Emily asked suddenly. "Accepting the deal? Accepting me?" Nathan looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. "Regret it?" He shook his head firmly. "Emily, you and Ethan and Olivia are the best things that ever happened to me. Why would I regret it? Because of how we started. Because of all the lies, all the pain." "The beginning doesn't define the whole," said Nathan, pulling her close. "Yes, we started rough. Yes, there were lies and pain. But look where we are now. Look at what we've built." Emily looked around at the thriving farm, at the house full of love, at the bright future her children would have. "We built something beautiful," she agreed. "We built a home," corrected Nathan. "Not just a house, but a home. And doing it by your side has been the greatest honor of my life." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, hands intertwined, knowing that no matter what the future brought, they would face it together. Years later, when Emily was in her 60s and Nathan in his late 60s, they were sitting on that same porch, watching little William play in the yard. He was 5 years old now, full of energy and curiosity, a miniature of his father, Ethan. Olivia had married an art teacher she met in the city and was expecting her first child. Ethan and Madison were considering having more children. The farm thrived under the joint management of Nathan and Ethan. Life was good. "If you could go back," Nathan said suddenly, Back to that wagon when you were being brought here for the first time, knowing everything you'd have to go through. Would you come? Emily didn't need to think long. Yes, she said without hesitation. 1,000 times yes, because every tear, every moment of pain, every hardship, it all led to this, to you, to our children, to our family. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. Nathan smiled, that full smile he reserved just for her. I wouldn't either, he said. You were the greatest gift life gave me, even if it came wrapped in complicated circumstances. We saved each other, Emily observed. You saved me from my family's lies. I saved you from your past, and together we built a future worth every hardship. William ran up to them then, with flushed cheeks and bright eyes. Grandpa? Grandma? He called. Come see what I found. They stood up, following their grandson to the garden, where he discovered an empty bird's nest that had fallen from a tree. Nathan knelt beside the boy, explaining about different types of birds, while Emily watched with a love so deep it hurt in a good way. This was her life. Not perfect, not without its scars and pains, but hers, real and true and built on choice and love. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, Nathan held Emily as he had every night for years. Thank you, he whispered in the dark, for being strong, for staying, for giving me a chance even when I didn't deserve one. You always deserved it, Emily replied, turning to face him even though she could barely see him in the darkness. You just needed to believe it. You taught me to believe, he said. You taught me that it's worth taking risks in love, that it's worth trying even when it's scary. And you taught me that I'm stronger than I thought, that my worth isn't defined by lies others told, that I deserve to be loved. They kissed, soft and gentle, a kiss that held decades of love, struggle, growth, and commitment. When they finally fell asleep, tangled together as always, Emily had a dream. She dreamed of the 23-year-old she had been, scared and broken, sitting in that wagon heading to an unknown life. In the dream, she approached that younger version of herself and whispered, "It's going to be okay. Better than okay. You'll find love, you'll find family, you'll find yourself. The lies don't define you, the past doesn't define you. You are strong, you are capable, you are worthy of all the good things to come. Just hold on and trust the process." Emily woke up with tears in her eyes but smiling, because that scared young woman had held on. She had trusted, and she had found something more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. Beside her, Nathan slept peacefully, his face relaxed and serene. She touched his face gently, grateful for this man, for this life, for every moment that had brought them here. From the other room she could hear little William laughing at something in his sleep. From the house next door, lights were still on where Ethan and Madison were probably finishing their day. Somewhere in town, Olivia was sleeping, dreaming of her own paintings and future. This was her legacy, not just the children she had raised, but the love she had planted, the honesty she had cultivated, the strength she had shown. Her family wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was hers. Emily closed her eyes again, pulling the blanket closer, and let contentment wrap around her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new stories, but today, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The woman who had been declared barren had become a mother, a wife, a grandmother. She had become strong. She had become loved. She had become whole. And the farmer who saw something that made his heart collapse. He saw his pregnant wife against all odds, yes. But more than that, he saw a woman who needed him as much as he needed her. He saw a chance to love again. He saw the beginning of something that would transform his life forever. Together, they had taken the broken pieces of their lives and created something whole, something beautiful, something that would last generations. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story. Do you think Emily and Nathan made the right decisions? How would you have reacted in their place? Share your honest opinions with us in the comments. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one. Your participation is very important to us. Thank you for following along with us this far.